Thanks for joining us today. I'm Gabe Garish, owner of Backwoods Pursuit, and today we're going to do an Athlon Cronus Rangefinder Binocular review. These are the Cronus UHD 10x50 rangefinding binoculars. Had a chance to test these out in the field over the last hunting season, as well as some really harsh hunting conditions, bright snow, really cold temperatures, that sort of thing. So got a really good idea of how these things performed in a variety of conditions. So come along as we go through this. I'm going to show you how the rangefinder functions as well, and walk through some of the menu options and setup functions of these rangefinders. They do have some really unique rangefinding options in their menu, so I want to go over that. As always, really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. A ton of good reviews over on the website as well, backwoodspursuit.com, so go check that out. Links to all that down in the description, as well as a link to the Athlon Cronus Rangefinder Binoculars, so you can check them out for yourself. Let's get started. All right, let's start with some of the specs and features on this real quick before we get into the details of how they performed and how the rangefinder functions. They come in at 38 ounces, so a little bit on the heavier side, but they are a rangefinding binocular, and they are a 10x50 binocular, so they're certainly bigger. For that size, they're not too bad at 38 ounces. Eye relief, you've got 17 millimeters of eye relief, and you have a 3-position eye cup, all the way out, and then a mid position, then a low position. You've got both a diopter and a focus ring, and neither of those are locking, unfortunately, but you have a diopter and a focus ring for the rangefinder side, and then the diopter for the binocular side. Again, 10x50. The battery compartment's right here on the end of the binoculars, so you don't have a tripod adapter threaded in there, unfortunately, so you have to use like a Really Right Stuff or Aussie equipment. I'll put links to those down in the description. Those both work really well with these, and use those in these. Now you've got XPL protective coating on the lenses, helps protect them from getting scratched, and fully multi-coated lenses as well to give you a nice crisp image on that part of things. Now these do feature UHD glass and a dielectric coating, along with the fully multi-coated lenses and the scratch resistant coating to help keep them protected. Field of view is at 338 feet at 1,000 yards, which is pretty typical for the 10x type of binocular. Now on the range-finding specs here, you've got 2,600 yards on reflective target. That's the max stated in the specs, and 1,000 yards on non-reflective or deer-sized target. I'm going to go over how these actually perform for me in the field in here in a minute, so stick around for that. But those are the specs for these guys. Now they do offer angle compensated range as well. So if you're a bow hunter or a rifle hunter and want that angle compensated range, they do feature that, along with a red reticle, which I really like in these guys. So we're going to go over some more of the details here and some of the likes and dislikes with these features. So after testing these throughout a season, I found that I really liked this focus mechanism. It's really smooth. There's no play whatsoever. It's just the right speed as well. So I really liked the focus mechanism. The eye cups here on the Cronus binoculars are fantastic. I really liked the eye cups. You've got the 3-position. I wish I had 4 or 5 positions, but 3 is fine. It does the job well enough. And I really liked the way that these are narrow enough, but not too narrow, that they're uncomfortable, but not so bulky that they get in the way. So really liked the way that those were built out. Now on the diopter and the focus mechanisms here underneath the eye cups, I wish that they locked. Unfortunately, they don't. They can move in your bino harness because they don't lock. So because there's 2 of them, you kind of have to remember the position of each of them in case you do bump them, or you're going to have to be readjusting. So that can be a little bit of a pain, but a lot of rangefinding binoculars don't have the locking options here below the eye cups here, but I wish they did. So that would be something that I would change about these. Real nice rubber armor coating here, and on the buttons are pretty nice and precise. They could have a little bit more of a click to them when you're going to range or whatnot. They can be a little bit hard to find if you have gloves on because they're pretty flush with the rest of the top of the binocular here. So either if they stuck out just a little bit more or had a little more definitive click, that would be nice in helping you know that you're on the range button or whatnot, particularly if you have gloves on. So a couple things there. Another thing I didn't love is that you don't have the ability, or it's not threaded for a tripod adapter. So you do have to use a Really Right Stuff cinch or Aussie equipment bino clamp, which those work really well also. Use both of those with these binoculars. Now one other thing that I noticed that was really interesting about these is, partially because they're a 10x50 binocular, you have larger barrels here, larger lenses on the end. So the interpupillary distance, or the distance from the center of one eye to the other, is fairly on the wide side, particularly if you have eyes that are close together. You need a narrow, or you have a narrow interpupillary distance measurement. I don't typically have an issue with that at all, but with these, I was right close to being touching with those barrels. So if you have a narrow interpupillary distance, you want to be aware that these might be a problem that way for you. You might not be able to get them close enough together to work for you. So keep that in mind on these guys. That's one thing that was interesting. Now optically, they were very nice and crisp and clear optically, give you a really nice picture. I did notice, like a lot of range-finding binoculars though, they have a little bit of a tint to them, so you can expect that. These ones, there's some I've noticed have say a greenish or bluish tint. These have kind of an emerald rose almost color tint to them, just a little bit. That's particularly when you get to the outer edge of the field of view. So it's not unpleasant by any stretch. It's a nice warm color, but it is there, and you can notice that if you hold them up and you move your eyes to the edge of the field of view, you can really notice it gets a little more on that rose color tint towards the outside edge of the field of view. So just kind of interesting, not good or bad, but I presume that'd be part of the factor of having a rangefinder binocular where you don't have anything that's catching that return laser other than the lenses themselves. So keep that in mind with these as well. Wouldn't expect that if you're looking through these, but they do give you a nice crisp image. Now as far as edge-to-edge clarity on these, they were pretty good. About the outer 25 to 30%, they started to lose some of that clarity on the outer edge of the field of view. So not amazing, but not bad either, particularly for a pair of rangefinding binoculars in the price point that you get these for. They perform really, really well that way, and they really give you a nice crisp image. You just lose a little bit of that clarity towards the outer edge of the field of view on these guys. Now with the rangefinding specs, this is where this was interesting for me because, typically with rangefinders, the specs that are stated on the charts are, the unit does not perform to those specs. And in the case of the Athlon Cronus here, that was not the case at all. So 2,600 yards max reflective was what's the spec state here. And I got easily well over 2,800 yards offhand on a non-reflective target, which I was super impressed with these guys. So they stayed at 1,000 yards on a non-reflective or deer-sized target. I was able to, time and time again, in a good lighting condition, of course, get 2,800 plus yards over and over and over, even in scan mode on these guys. So I was super impressed with those that way. Now on conditions where the conditions were really harsh, we were out doing some late season rifle elk hunting, and it was just a pure whiteout. It was just super bright. It was a bright sunny day. It snowed a bunch, and so it was white everywhere. I was able to get out to about 1,200 yards with these 1250 before I'd stop returning a range there. So still plenty good, and still exceeded some of those specs. 1,000 yards non-reflective. Of course, snow can certainly be reflective that way, but those harsh lighting conditions really can cut down on the ability of a rangefinder. So still plenty for what I needed them for, and performed really, really well that way. The scan functionality is really fast as well. I love the way that these scan. It's super fast. So if you're needing to check out an entire hillside or a group of trees or whatnot, it can do that really, really well, and it works really well that way. So really impressed with the rangefinding specs. Now you also have a red reticle, which I really like with these guys. I do wish it was an adaptive display like some of the others out there. That way it would adapt with the brightness of the light outside, but they don't. So I found that that medium range, that setting 2 or 3 does pretty well and covers most of your scenarios unless you're in that bright sun. Had to bump it up to the higher setting for that. Or if you're really using it in a lot of low light, then you want to bump that down so you don't get blinded by that red reticle from the rangefinding function. So overall though, did really well that way. Adaptive would be a bit of an upgrade though for me on these guys. Now one last thing I wanted to mention that I observed with these is that, being that the reticle for the rangefinder is in the right hand side, your right eye, if you have a especially narrow interpupillary distance or a very wide, if you have these things all the way out wide interpupillary distance, you're going to notice that those numbers or letters are going to be tilted or canted one way or the other, because they're perfectly level and leveled inside of the optic here. If you're at about a halfway through their interpupillary distance. So for me, because I had these run a little bit inside of that halfway mark, they were a little bit tilted. Not too bad. It wasn't terribly annoying, but if you have them all the way out, then you could really notice that the numbers that you're displaying are tilted a bit that way. So keep that in mind as well. I know that's the case with a lot of range-finding binoculars because that's tough to get around. So, but I did notice that with these guys as well. So let's run outside now. I'm going to show you what these look like through the binoculars, as well as some of the functions and modes that you have with these rangefinder, on the rangefinder side of these binoculars, and how they perform. All right, so you turn this on with the fire button and then hold down the mode button to get to the programming mode. So you have your yards or meters, so select which one you want there. The next one is where you've got 4 modes to choose from. Off is going to be your standard mode. And in standard mode, what you're going to see here is you're going to be able to scan the most effectively in this mode. You're not going to have any kind of tilt or angle or anything like that displayed. It's just going to be your straight up line of sight range. So next up, if we go to tilt mode and select that, what that's going to give you is the line of sight range displayed first, followed by the degree or the angle of that range. So if you're uphill or downhill, you're going to see that degree. Next up, we're going to go to vertical, or the V, and select that mode. Now in this mode, what you get is first the line of sight range, then after that you're going to have the vertical distance from where you're at up to that point. So whatever that is, it's going to display in yards or meters how high up or how far down you're going to have to go to then get to that spot. So that can be super useful if you need to find out, you know, how much of a climb you're going to have or how much of a descent you're going to have to get to that particular object. Next is the horizontal setting, and in this setting, this is what you're used to more so. You're going to have first your line of sight display, followed by the horizontal or angle compensated range. So this is one you're going to use most of the time if you're archery hunting or that sort of thing, but that's super useful that way. Again, with all of these, I do wish that they didn't display after the line of sight mode. That's kind of a bummer in the way that the rangefinder operates as a whole, but it's pretty quick as well, so it's not too bad to get from one to the next. It's kind of like the Leica in that regard. So once we've selected what we want there, the next options are the auto, the golf, or the flag mode. So in these modes, what we're going to see is on the auto mode is going to be best if you're doing a lot of scanning. It's going to scan further and closer all together, so you're not going to have any disruption in your scanning if you select that auto mode. So if we go ahead and select auto mode here and then do some scanning, you'll see you get really fast returns in the ranging, both close and far away. It doesn't matter that way. Now if we go back here and select the next mode here is the hunt mode, and select that guy, then when we go to in the hunt mode, what it's going to do, it's going to give you the range for the farthest, or it's like brush mode if you want to call it that. It's going to give you return the range for the farthest object that the laser bounces off of. So if you're in brushy material but you want to range an animal that's behind brush, it's useful that way. And the one thing to keep in mind is that does affect scanning as well, though. Both the golf and the range mode will affect scanning. So if you are scanning and then you try to bring that in closer from the scanning, when you are scanning, it's going to stop the scan and you have to restart your scan. And the same with the golf mode. If you're scanning and then you go to a farther point, it's going to stop the scan and not allow you to continue to scan at a longer distance. So keep that in mind. All right, so now we're going to navigate over to the golf mode, and in this mode you're going to select the flag, and then if you go to range there, what you're going to get in the flag mode or golf mode is the rangefinder is going to return the yardage that is closest to you, the opposite of the hunt mode. So this is designed if you're wanting to pick out a real small object and find what that range is, like a golf flag, or out in the field if you want to use that when you're out hunting. It's going to pick up that branch or that brush that's closest to you. So that can be useful in both scenarios. But again, keep in mind the scan limitations when you are in one of those modes. If you do a lot of scanning, again, go back to that auto mode. Now the last setting you've got is the brightness modes. You've got 4 different brightness options that you can pick from. Now I found the 2 or 3 option was about the right brightness for most of your situations that you're in. Maybe not quite bright enough on the 2 setting for some of your brighter days, but for the most part that worked really well and didn't make me have to make any changes out in the field to that, unless you're in something really bright like those snowy days. You might have to bump that up to the highest setting for those type of situations. So The range-finding functions are really smooth in their operations. The menu is really easy to navigate through if you do need to make a change out in the field. So it's nice that it's not real complicated. You don't have to go read the manual or try to remember how to navigate through the menu. Really simple and easy to do that with the Athlon Cronus range-finding binos. So that is the Athlon Cronus UHD range-finding binoculars. Really a great value, particularly for their price point. Again, I'll put a link to these down in the description for you, so you can check them out for yourself if you'd like to. Drop any questions or comments about these guys down in the comments section. Happy to help and answer any questions if I can do so. Thanks for watching here today. We'll see you next time.